Right, hello, how are we doing? It's been a while since I actually sat down and just spoke at a camera and not just spoke about training, etc. Which I quite like these videos. I quite like where I'm just speaking about a specific topic. So hopefully people do. If not, sorry. But I thought to start off, obviously by the title you can tell this is pretty much what to think about prior to taking anabolics, what to think about prior to taking PDs, how to go about things. So I got some questions from Instagram as well, so I'll run through them too. But in regards to myself, because it is my YouTube channel, so I probably do need to give some sort of insight to me. The date is currently the 4th of March, 2025, and I am about 3-4 days into an appetite reset because my appetite is absolutely shit. I'm never a big eater in a way of my appetite's never really that high. I can eat food, I can get it down, but it gets to a point where it's almost like diminishing returns and there's not much response there. My body weight hasn't really changed too much since the start of the year, which isn't that great. I look a lot better. I've definitely grown a lot, but I also want to see scale weight going up, which it hasn't really been doing. So I don't really feel that responsive to things. My appetite's absolutely horrendous. So what we're going to do is go for 4 to 5 weeks or so. Pretty aggressive with food. I'm not going to put totals on here because it's not really that relevant, but it's on my Instagram. I put it today. Anabolics kept the same. We just slashed food. Cardio and step staying the same as well. And then we're just going to pull down to around, I'd imagine, maybe at mid to low 200s. See where things are at. Go into one more push and then start prep for the back end of the year, which would be lovely. So that's basically where I'm at. But in regards to actually the title of the video, what to think about prior to taking PDs, how to go about things, where to start, what to do. So first thing I want to talk about before I actually go on to anything specific. First of all, I'm not a doctor, believe it or not, an online coach. So this isn't gospel. This is literally just my advice. This is literally just for educational purposes, and do not take this as the right thing to do. This is literally just my advice to anybody who are going to take PDs. Because people are always going to take PDs. It's going to be something which I'm never going to advise someone to do. I heavily don't advise anyone doing this. It's just more so, if you are going to, I would advise doing things in a safer way as possible. So first thing I want to touch upon. So I'm assuming the person watching this is someone who has never taken anything before. So what is the actual reason that you want to take anabolics? Do you feel that you've tried absolutely everything you can to maximize your potential from a natural perspective? I know that phrase gets thrown around a lot, but what I mean by that is, have you spent time pushing up your food? Have you spent time in a deficit and adhering to that? Have you spent time adhering to your nutritional targets to the best that you possibly can? Have you learned to push your food up, pull your food down, and still train to a good degree? Have you learned to train to a good degree, first of all, as well? Have you put loads of effort into doing things outside of anabolics? Because if you haven't, you're not going to maximize your potential for growth on anabolics. I'm not going to say anabolics are the icing on the cake. They're not. They're a different fucking cake entirely. But you're going to get so much more out of your anabolics, even from a very low amount, through having your nutrition, having your training in a good position. Even your recovery, things like that, your stress management, they're things which are massively, massively important. Again, what's your reason for taking anabolics? Do you just want to be the biggest person in the gym? Are you looking to compete? Now, I'm not going to say if you're looking to compete, it's absolutely fine for you to take anabolics, but at least there's a reason for you to take anabolics. At least there's a reason if you're wanting to compete at a high level, if you're looking to compete within untested federations, maybe you're looking to go down the route of a pro card and you're looking towards that, you probably are going to have to take anabolic steroids. So at least that's a reason for it. Does it make it absolutely fine? Absolutely not, but at least it's a reason for it. If, in my opinion, if you're not looking to compete, I'd really, really heavily urge not using anabolics because there's minimal pros to that, in my opinion. And also, are your reasonings behind taking assistance, are they process-based? So are you doing it because you love the process? Are you doing it because you love training, you love bodybuilding? Or are you looking to take anabolics just to look a certain way? The only person who really matters is yourself. If you're thinking, I want to look a certain way, for me, that's fair. That's absolutely fine. But I don't agree with taking anabolics for just the sake of social media validation or validation from other people, because no one cares as much as you do. If you look at someone, look, how many times you scroll through Instagram and you're saying, oh, that person looks good, but do you really, really care deep down about how they look? No, you're not losing sleep over that overnight. For example, the same thing goes the other way. If you take anabolics and you run into serious long-term health issues, you're going to lose sleep over it. Your Instagram following, they'll be there for you, but they're not going to lose sleep over it. Do you get what I mean? That sounds very negative, but that's almost like a harsh reality of things. And the reason I say those things is because a lot of people fall into taking anabolics for the really, really wrong reasons. Again, the main form being validation from other people. Maybe, for example, you've always been the skinnier lad. You've always been the person who wants to be bigger, who wants to look bigger. And you want to feel like you're not that anymore. I get that, I really, really do. But as much as anabolics will help with that, they're never going to be the answer to all your problems. They're not going to fix these issues. Yeah, they're going to build your muscle, you're going to look bigger, but they're not going to fix body dysmorphia. You're not going to take some drugs and be like, oh, I'm perfectly happy with how I look. You're always going to want more. And that's where anabolics are like a slippery slope, because you can always take more. You can always do more. But then you have the knockoff of negative side effects. So it's again one of those things where I'd never look at anabolics as like, this is the answer to all my problems, because it's really not. Following on from that, anabolics, you don't need them to build muscle. You don't need them to lose fat. Sure, they fucking help. They really, really do. But they do exactly what they say. Performance enhancing drugs, performance enhancing. If your performance is shit, they're going to enhance shit. They're going to give you more shit. That's why I would say, look upon your training, look upon your nutrition, optimize them to the best position that you possibly can do as well. Look at them as like a multiplier. If you multiply 1 by 2, you get 2. But if you multiply 0.5 by 2, you get 1. You don't really get much. If you multiply 0 by 0, if you're doing fuck all, you're still going to get 0. You're still going to get fuck all, but you're probably still going to have the side effects. So essentially, prior to taking any assistance, look upon making sure that there's a concrete reason behind that, and making sure that you've got everything backed up beforehand, so that you are going to be able to make as much progress as you possibly can do. Regardless, people are always going to take anabolics. So the reason I'm making this video is to essentially have a bit of a chat regarding my views on certain things and how you can set yourself up to make as much progress as possible, and also make sure that you are as safe as you possibly can be as well. So prior to jabbing yourself with test, look upon where you're at naturally, get your blood work done, understand where your testosterone's at. That's going to give you an indication of how much to take within your first cycle, and if there's any sort of other health markers which you'd want to fix or could be at more risk from taking a hit once you're assisted. I'd also say within your first cycle, I'm going to say this straight away, avoid oral use. I've got a question on this, and I'll get into this a little bit later on anyway, but as much as it might be easier to take a tablet, take some Anavar, take some D-bol, they're always going to be a lot more toxic towards the liver organs. So even though like a milder compound, something like Anavar, even at like 20 milligrams, it can be enough to start decreasing your HDL cholesterol significantly. So I'd always stay clear of them. Only use orals, in my opinion, within like a contest prep setting, maybe in like a photo shoot, but I'd really stay clear of them. Where to actually start? Now, we kind of know what our main aim is within a first cycle. We want to elevate our testosterone above its natural production. Your body's going to be creating testosterone naturally at an individual rate. Everyone's going to be a little bit differently here. Hence why we want to understand where you're going to be at from a natural perspective, so we can understand how much to take based on that. Now, testosterone will be the only compound which you need to utilize within a first cycle, simply just to understand how our own natural androgen reacts within the body. Helps us to understand how we respond to that, and also keep a natural amount of like DHT and estrogen present as well. Because something which is massively forgotten about is that estrogen is good. We want estrogen. As we increase our testosterone, estrogen is going to increase as a result of that. Yes, there's going to be side effects when estrogen is too high, but estrogen is good. Estrogen is cardioprotective, is neuroprotective. We need that within a first cycle. We need that in any sort of cycle. So what is the magic first cycle? So, anywhere between roughly 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams is usually considered TRT levels, depending on your lab results, if that makes sense. However, we don't want to start off right at the end of that on 100 milligrams, because all we're going to really do is just shut down our body's natural production of testosterone, shut off our body's natural hormones, and not really get too much of a benefit off that. We still want to be making some progress with. We want to elevate our testosterone to a good degree. So what I would say is that you can most likely start off on 200 milligrams of testosterone and realistically not have any negative side effects at all. I'd also say do not take an aromatase inhibitor with that 200 milligrams of testosterone. The duration of your cycle will be to maximize results, but then also limit deleterious health effects from that as well. Now, we know that there's been very minimal health side effects from even like 300 milligrams of testosterone for a cycle of 20 weeks. So knowing that, we ideally want to start, we don't need to start at 300. I'd heavily advise not starting at 300, but we can start relatively low and work up our dose when we actually need to. And realistically, within a first cycle, this can last from 20, 24 weeks, maybe even more, maybe even upwards to 6 months to a year, because it's going to be your first exposure. Now, I really wouldn't be looking to increase your testosterone dosage within your first 6 months, in my personal opinion. I would say if you can start off a cycle at 200 milligrams of testosterone, run that for, let's say, 12 weeks, get blood work done then. I don't mean get blood work then to look upon negative health effects. You're probably not going to see anything. You'll see your LH and your FSH be pretty much in the gutter, but that's to be expected because you've shut them down through taking exogenous testosterone. However, we're still going to be able to get a lot out of that initial dosage for a very good amount of time. So I would say within your first fair few months of taking anabolics, probably don't look to escalate your dosage. Get the absolute most out of the least. Then when we're maybe like 5 to 6 months down the line, that's when we can look upon increasing dosage. So you can maybe increase dosage by maybe 25 to 50 milligrams. I'd probably say 50 milligrams will be absolutely fine. But essentially what we ideally want to do within just taking testosterone on its own is progress testosterone to a point where we reach a maximum tolerable dose. So where we cannot, let's say, tolerate the high amounts of estrogen which are now present as a result of testosterone being elevated. So for some people that unfortunately might be 300 milligrams, it might be 400 milligrams, it might be 500 milligrams, it might be 700. We don't know that until we have run that with a specific individual. As I said, testosterone could be incremented in, like, say, 50 milligram increments, but we also need to understand that depending on the ester, so for example, an enanthate ester, we need to allow blood serum levels to peak and saturate. So don't go just escalating dosage every 2 weeks, because it's probably going to take between 14 days, 10 to 14 days for that to begin to saturate, and even longer for that to fully saturate within your blood and actually get the most out of that. So I'd be looking to increase dosage maybe every like 6 to 8 weeks within your first cycle, just to make sure that those are saturating beforehand. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I'd be looking to progress dosage once food has been escalated, and let's say there's a body weight increase, but there's not like a significant change in your visual. So for example, if you're not looking much bigger as a result of increasing your dosage, if your training performance isn't significantly increasing, that's when you can utilize anabolics as like your next driver alongside food. I know that's very rough, but this is obviously going to be very person dependent, and there's no like concrete example to give. I can't just say to person A watching this is exactly what you need to do, because I'm not working hands-on with you, so I can't see these week in, week out. I can't say, for example, after 4 weeks, go to this. After 6 weeks, go to this, etc., etc. Hopefully that's all very useful. If you want a bit more sort of information regarding this and that, I have got a first cycle guide that is in my Instagram bio. Click that link, I'll send it straight through to you, and there's a bit more information. It's a lot of this, but it's a little bit more information on top of that as well, so I can send that over to you. But hopefully that goes to a decent amount of detail. Again, I'm not a medical professional, so this is literally for the aim of education and just helping a few people out. Now, I've also got a couple of questions. 20 years old, is that too early to be started? Well, the question is 20 years old, starting a test cycle. 20 years old is young. Do you need to take testosterone at 20 years old to make progress? Absolutely not. You will still be able to progress naturally. However, as I've mentioned on this video, this is how I would go about your first cycle. So you're probably going to take testosterone anyway. You're probably going to take GIA. This is almost like how I would go through that in the healthiest possible way. However, I would heavily advise not going on GIA that young. Worst cycle I have seen. I've seen a few. I've seen people run grams of test in combination with D-bol every single day, which I really wouldn't do. And that was literally like an off season as well. So please don't do that. I've seen people blasting Superdrol. I can't think of it off the top of my head, like a specific cycle, but in terms of like specifics that I've seen, which I'm not a massive fan of, heavy oral use in off season, D-bol, Superdrol, Winstrol, please stay clear. I would always urge towards testosterone base, and then either, again, this is person dependent, either DHT derivative or potentially an aromatase inhibitor. I really I'm steering towards the HT derivative, but there's sometimes a place for an aromatase inhibitor in there as well. But I can't think off the top of my head of like a specific cycle. What orals to kickstart cycle? None. Please don't use an oral in your first cycle. Please don't. As I mentioned, you do not need to be taking anything more than testosterone. Testosterone is all that you need within a first cycle. You used to see people years ago saying that, oh, I use some D-bol just to kickstart, I use some Anabol just to kickstart. Why? You can kickstart by just taking test. It's the only anabolic which is naturally produced in your body. So just take that and you'll be absolutely fine. You're going to tolerate that to a better degree than you are any other anabolic steroid. So stick with that, please. Which test do I use? Now, there's going to be different testosterone esters. So what we need to understand is the ester half-life. So for example, I usually just go for an ananthate ester. The half-life is usually going to be around, say, 10 to 14 days or so. So that's when we will usually see that kicking in and begin to saturate. I would just stick with an ananthate. That's all I ever really use. That seems sound for me. But again, the test ester isn't massively important as long as you understand when those levels are going to begin to peak. How do I know that I'm using enough drugs? You're growing. If you're growing, you're absolutely fine. If you're progressing in the gym, if your body weight is going up, you're probably using enough drugs. You do not always need to use more. More is not always more. Sometimes less is actually more. This is more specific to me. When am I getting blood work done? I'm going to spin this around a little bit and I'm going to advise when to get blood work done, especially when you're a couple of cycles deep. I get blood work done around 3 times a year. So I would typically get them done before I start an off season. So before I start a cycle, at the end of the cycle, and then typically because I've prepped for the last 3 years, usually at the back end of prep. So that usually goes hand in hand with roughly end of my blast, end of my prep, before I start my blast in my off season, if that makes sense. So I usually get blood work done 3 times a year. So I'll probably get blood work done back end of this cycle, just before I start prep, just to see where things are at. So that'll be sort of like May, June time this year. And then DECA within a first cycle. DECA has been seen to enlarge the heart significantly, aka heart hypertrophy, through severe impairment of diastolic and systolic function. Yes, it will probably build you a lot of muscle, but there's going to be a lot safer alternatives. For example, as I mentioned on here, testosterone. Using as much testosterone as you possibly can before looking upon, let's say, negative side effects on high estrogen. But then the best possible case from that is to just combat that high estrogen. So that's either going to be a DHT derivative, so primoamastron, or in some cases, an aromatase inhibitor. That's what I would advise. Do not use DECA within your first cycle, and I'd probably argue don't use DECA at all. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Maybe you've learned something fantastic. Let me know if you enjoy the sit-down educational sort of videos, because they actually are quite fun. So if you do, feel free to drop a like, subscribe. As I mentioned in my Instagram bio, to be fair, in the bio, I'll put down the cycle guide, or like a link to that anyway. So if you want to grab that, feel free. And if there's anything in regards to PDs that you want to ask, feel free to drop me a message on WhatsApp. The link to my WhatsApp is in my Instagram, or just drop me a DM on Instagram. I'll be happy to answer there. So I said, like, subscribe, and I will catch you either in another training video, or if I do another sit-down video, which I might do in the future.